So good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon to those who made it for this session. When I came up, I saw that there were crowds of people still lining up and seeing if they can make an access to this floor, which seems to have too many people already on this floor, and due to security reasons, there is an impediment. But I hope that in the course of the session, there will be more people also joining our discussion here, because I'm quite sure that we are going to have really exciting discussions, on the topic, which is very much relevant, in view of the challenges that we are sharing globally. And this is the climate change, this is the sustainable development goals that all the UN members have signed up to. You clearly also have noticed that the president, the new President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has also unveiled her priorities, and becoming a climate neutral region in the world by 2050 is the objective that we are facing. But it's not enough if Europe alone is working towards this objective, because we share the planet, we share the globe. We need to also make sure that there will be a livable planet for the future generations. And particularly our new generation is now looking for a change. They are actually asking the politicians to take action in order to make this change possible. In order to make these transformations that we are facing possible, clearly an important contribution of research and innovation is something that we should keep in mind. Another high priority already for the current Commission and also for the future Commission is cooperation with Africa. And this session actually brings together these two topics, namely energy for all, international cooperation, and SDGs, with a particular focus on Africa. And that's why I'm really happy to introduce to you the excellent speakers for this session, and I'd also like them to take seats. First, Professor Dr. Joachim von Braun. Please. Director of the Center for Development Research, Bonn University, Professor for Economic and Technological Change. He's also member of the board for a Green Revolution in Africa. So clearly has been dealing with African issues. Well, there are also quite a few other titles, which, in view of the time, I'm not mentioning all of them. Very much welcome to the panel. Then I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Linda Davies. Please have a seat. Who's CEO of Giraffe Bioenergy, a developer of biorefineries producing ethanol for the clean cooking market in Kenya, and who has 15 years of experience in senior positions in renewable energy, in particular conventional and advanced biofuels. By the way, also PhD in microbiology, biotechnology in Sydney, and so on. And the third speaker at our panel is Mrs. Lucia Pakulumpagi Wamala. I'm not sure if I pronounced it.
You said it wonderfully.
Who's CEO and founder of Bakulu Power, a renewable energy company based in Uganda, which promotes sustainable electrification of end users in sub-Saharan Africa. She has one of the 30 most promising entrepreneurs of Africa. Congratulations. Forbes Africa 2017, and also represented her company at several high-level events. So now, without further ado, I'd like to ask our panelists to give just the first presentations, namely focusing and underlining for their specific area where does actually international cooperation contribute to solving the sustainable development goals. Well, particularly in the area of energy, as we are discussing it in this session, and also highlighting more particularly the role of research and innovation in this cooperation. And then we'll come back some follow-up questions later. I know that Professor Van Braun has also a short presentation to show, so why not kick it off, please.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to talk about energy for sustainable development, and Madam Chairwoman, the question which you just posed is a real central one. What it takes for international cooperation to advance energy for all is cooperation in science, cooperation in finance, but also cooperation at the grassroots level with communities. I want to highlight the...
By the way, can you see the slides?
Do you have them up there?
Oh, they are up there. Okay,
yeah.
Good.
The back row has to put on their binoculars. SDG 7 is central, but is not the only sustainable development goal which is the focus of our discussion this afternoon. It has 3 main targets. By 2030, ensure universal access to affordable, reliable and modern energy services, increase substantially the share of renewables, and double the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency. Very important. How are we doing related to these targets and the goal? On the record is that more people are connected to the grid. There's improvement since 2010. So if we put it negatively, from 1.2 billion to 840 million people are not connected. But what does connectivity mean? It does not mean that there is secure and safe access to energy, power cuts. Secondly, we do not see much progress on traditional biomass use. I'm sure my colleagues on the panel will talk more about traditional biomass for cooking. And third, there's insufficiently used opportunities coming from decentralized grids and renewable energy sources. There's not much progress on that front. The electricity access shown here on this map, countries with blue dots have very limited access to electricity. Access to clean energy for cooking, the countries with the blue dots here, have large pockets of, especially in rural and peri-urban areas, where clean energy for cooking is missing. This has a huge health burden. It's not just cooking time and burden on women, it is a health issue. Our issue is not just a climate change issue of energy efficiency and improvement in access to energy, it's a health issue. Let me emphasize that 3 times at this point. We must facilitate the transition, especially in Africa, from charcoal and wood. It, by the way, applies also for parts of South Asia. In order to overcome the health burdens, to deal with climate change, to overcome the productivity burdens on women and children, I would say, to address the deforestation issue, the food and energy nexus issue, and to tap the unrealized opportunities for education, because if there is no light in the evening, kids don't perform in school. The biggest breakthrough for girls' education in Bangladesh, outside Africa of course, was rural electrification. It had also a major impact on getting married later and reduction in population growth. So it's a broad social benefit which comes from electrification. Solutions are available regarding access, decentralized off-grid solutions, and promoting the integrated approaches of bringing the bioeconomy together with the renewable energy opportunities. So far, there is still about 60% of primary energy in most African countries coming from biomass. That is not a problem if it were clean biomass use, but it's often not. So getting efficiency in that sector needs to parallel the investment opportunities for solar and wind. We cannot just deal with solar and wind in isolation. Renewable energy technologies are spreading in Africa, solar and wind, and facilitating also the telecommunications advances. And let me conclude with these 3 points on partnership, which you, Madam Chair, have emphasized at the outset. I emphasize knowledge, investment, and incentives. Knowledge, the science agenda for research and educational partnerships between Europe and Africa, with African startups, universities, and civil society organizations. Secondly, EU and its countries to invest at big scale in carbon mitigation through renewable energy projects, taking Article 6 of the climate agreement from Paris as a basis for partnership on energy innovation in Africa seriously. And lastly, incentives, support incentives for the private investment, venture funding with communities, with local communities in solar, wind, modern bio-based local and regional grids. All this will boost African urban and rural development, and that's what we should be after. Thank you for your attention.
Many, many thanks, Professor from Brown. Well, you already brought in the private investment part and also the role of the private players, which now we can also discuss in more detail. But perhaps before giving the floor to Dr. Linda Davis, can you already made a few hints which went beyond energy, but perhaps you can also highlight the effects on other sustainable development goals beyond energy and climate when we cooperate on energy-related research and innovation with Africa in particular.
Well, we all cannot imagine achieving SDG 1, ending extreme poverty, without moving fast on the energy frontier. We cannot imagine a world without hunger and improved nutrition, without energizing the farming and food processing economies. I hinted already at education. Schools without energy will have no access to digital technology, and the kids cannot learn. Those of us who roam around in poor countries know these pictures where children at night sit under the few street lights or in front of a shop in order to study. I could go on. Probably most of the SDGs are unachievable without fast movement in energy. And we need to see the nexus to sustainable use of land and sustainable use of water. The water, energy, and food nexus is critical in order to have systems approaches rather than isolated goal-by-goal strategies.
Okay, very well. Now we go to Giraffe Bioenergy introduction. Say Dr. Linda Davis, the floor is yours, and I guess you will also underline the particular challenges that you face but also at the same time the business opportunities that energy for all value chain actually would provide for your societies. So please.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to follow suit and stand as the good professor has done. And it's always nice to follow a knowledgeable person because he has made most of my presentation. So I'm going to have to very quickly change. And I'm going to probably provide some color from being an experienced African woman who's experienced some of the stories that some of the data that has been given. So forgive me, I'm going to be a little African and tell you some stories. I don't think I should take the professorial side, which I tend to do at university, but I think in this situation, we can understand the problem in a little bit more color. So I'm the CEO of Giraffe Bioenergy, and this company I founded in 2017 because of the need to solve some of the problems that we have under SDG 7, and specifically that of cooking. I'm really pleased that Professor has touched on cooking, so I'm just going to add color around the issue of cooking because it is one that I'm very passionate about. So very quickly, who we are, working in the issue of cooking, and I really like the fact that it was said you cannot deal with an SDG in isolation. The water, food, land, energy nexus is one that is very, very important to me. And so my company has taken a number of iterations, and now we find ourselves being a developer of rural cassava-based bioeconomies in Kenya, producing both food and fuel, securing livelihoods. And I'll describe more about that. At first, I was a biofuel company. And being in the European Union, I have to very quickly apologize for the word biofuel, because I know it's a very emotive subject. I know biofuels are maligned. There's a talk about the food and fuel debate, which I want to say Giraffe Bioenergy is not about that. I worked in the US for 10 years where I encountered the food and fuel debate, but I hope at the end of this presentation you'll be able to understand that biofuel is not a bad word, especially when we're using ethanol, biofuel, to solve the issue of clean cooking. So I'm not talking about biofuels as a gasoline or petrol extender or an additive in the transport. That's another discussion. We're talking about biofuels in the context of cooking and how that impacts a number of SDGs and how that impacts development. So I hope I'm okay talking about biofuels in that context, but I'm going to call it ethanol cooking fuel as opposed to a biofuel. So this is a collage of pictures, just showing how cassava, just some happy pictures around how cassava can catalyze a bioeconomy. Cassava is a crop, I don't want to give you too much detail around that, but it is high disease resistant. It's very underutilized in East Africa. In fact, it's not considered a food crop in Kenya, even though it is a crisis crop. So these are some of the farmers that I've met. I don't think I've got a pointer. And some of the economies that we can catalyze in these rural areas. And I'm sure we'll get to talk more about that. So not to belabor the point, the problem with dirty cooking, Professor's already explained, we have the challenge of dirty cooking has devastating social, health, and environmental and climate change impacts, right? So number one, women and children spend up to 5 hours collecting firewood and at the expense of other activities, right? Now, this is a picture that I took myself. This is 52 kilograms of firewood, and women have to do this once or twice a week and walk 7 kilometers into the forest with concurrent social issues, including snake bites. You know, these are some of the things you don't hear about until you're actually roaming around in these countries and you understand that this is a bigger problem than what we might hear about. A serious health problem. That is a picture of my auntie. And I took that picture in 2003 when I was visiting while I was studying for my PhD in Australia. I was not aware of this problem, I'll be honest with you. But it was just a picture that I took because she would not allow me to sit in the kitchen with her. And she said to me at that time, you can't handle the smoke, you can't handle the heat, you be outside. And so I took this picture. The sad part of it is, when I came back to Kenya after studying for my PhD and working in the US for 10 years, I went back to my village because one of my aunties had passed away. and I took a similar picture. Nothing had changed in my village, right? And this was very, very disturbing to me because the previous year, I had realized and learned about the issue of dirty cooking, and I'm embarrassed to say, working in the US, I had no idea. And I didn't realize that my village was very, very much impacted. I knew there was a problem with water. I knew there was a problem with electricity. So when I got my first job, the first thing I did was I connected my village to the grid. And I brought a water pipe. But cooking to me wasn't anything that I needed to solve. And now here I am, pretty much dedicating the rest of my life to figure out how we can work on this in a systems nexus approach, as has been explained. In my country alone, about 17,000 people die every year. That's about 300 a week. Women and children primarily, because they cooked. And we're not talking about accidents of fire. We're not talking about carbon monoxide, which tends to be dramatic. We're talking about respiratory diseases that comes from being in that environment. The WHO says, as has been said, it's a serious health problem. And the number is cooking in the kitchen for 1 hour a day is the equivalent of smoking 4 packets of cigarettes a day. Now, if you ask any grandmother, any auntie in Kenya, do you smoke 4 packets of cigarettes? They'll say no, right? And yet this is what we do with our women, with our children, every single day. It's a serious, serious problem. Finally, devastating to the environment. Now, this is one that most people can understand. Charcoal production is the biggest driver of deforestation in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, deforestation has impact for food security. Deforestation has impact for climate change. Obviously, I don't have to tell you that. So if we can solve the issue of dirty cooking or biomass-based cooking that is based on logging old forests, then we will be impacting climate change and food security as well as maintaining our natural environment. One final statistic, and then we can move on, is in Kenya alone, cooking with biomass is the second driver of greenhouse gases. 40% of greenhouse gas emissions in Kenya is a result of biomass cooking. So if we can solve that issue, we will be well on our way to meeting our Paris Agreement commitments. Okay, so again, I know this is a research and innovation area, but this is not just an emotive issue, it's not just a development issue. The charcoal value chain, or the traditional value chain, is worth $42 billion in 2020. So when we're looking at research and innovations, there are actually market-based solutions, right? Because remember, charcoal is a commodity that is bought. So every family has a budget line. Every family in Nairobi has a $25 to $30 budget line that they spend on charcoal, old growth charcoal, 100-year-old trees, every single day, because 85% of Kenyans cook with biomass. So what we're saying is, we have this economy that is there. It's an informal economy, but one that can be formalized with a clean cooking fuel, and we get all the benefits that we've just described. SDGs, you talked about SDGs. I'm not going to go through all of them. When we solve the problem of cooking, and my solution is ethanol cooking fuel, we're impacting that's 12 SDGs, right? And I'm happy to share this slide. I'm not going to go through it. So quickly, the solution with the land. Let's have regenerative agroforestry. Let's have regenerative agriculture. Let's develop cassava, which is drought resistant. We'll have outgrowers. We're lifting livelihoods. We're having women as the front of that solution. We'll grow our fresh cassava roots. We'll dry them. That's a value chain solution where we are creating jobs and opportunity in areas where they don't typically have one. And our output is ethanol cooking fuel. So I think I'm going to stop there, and thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the discussion later.
Many, many thanks, Dr. Linda Davis, for this really compelling story. I really always admire the stories because the stories actually connect with the people. So they really make it much more understandable what kind of impact the solutions that you've developed can have on people's lives, well, you also counted all the SDGs, but it goes beyond, because it's really the innovative solutions which are based on the local raw materials, but really providing the healthy, environmental friendly way, and actually that you've been able also to put them into the market. This is something which are aiming at with these kind of solutions. So that was really a very, very nice and compelling story. Now let us continue with Miss Pakulumpagi Vamala.
I could see you pause for a moment.
And perhaps you can explain, namely, what particular challenges and obstacles you've encountered with access to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa, and actually how can R&I partnership help in overcoming these challenges?
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually really happy that you said you like stories, because I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to break tradition and I'm going to sit down. My heels are a little high. And I really just have a story to explain research innovation and how this whole thing came about for me. So I started my company called Bukulu Power about 3 years ago. You can see it's a piece of my last name. It started as a legacy project for me in a way to honor my late parents. So I got the idea. I was in Uganda and I saw garbage on the street, and I started to think, okay, well, what can we do with the waste? And a lot of the waste is agricultural. And I was like, I'm going to make fertilizer. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I'm going to go back to Canada, which is where I grew up. You can hear my accent. And I'm going to start an NGO. And I felt warm and fuzzy. I'm helping people. This is great. Then I realized starting an NGO, a tax-exempt NGO in Canada, to sell fertilizer, which isn't even a need, was not helping the goal I was set out to achieve. And what I really wanted to do was to create prosperity, which I believe is very different than eradicating poverty. I think those are two very different things. So I started to think, well, what is the root problem here? Like, what is the reason? Sorry, I'm not used to these Britney Spears, Madonna microphones. So I started to think, well, what's the real issue here? And to me, it was electricity. So I said, okay, my late father left us some land. So I'm like, I'm going to have a solar farm. Like, that's going to be so simple. That is not legal to do in Uganda. We have a very, very robust regulatory framework. So then I just started to think, okay, maybe I'll do a land lease agreement. Then I said, okay, I'm going to be out of the game once I make like $1,000. What can I do? Hence, like, this is the research part. So I heard about one district in Uganda called Buvuma, which doesn't have any electricity at all. It's the only district like this. And it's the kind of thing you hear it, but you really can't imagine what this feels like until you're there. So, I put together, a little bit of a ragtag team like a good entrepreneur does, and we went to the island to go meet with the local chiefs. And we did extensive research. We did a huge socioeconomic study where we knocked on every single door. Even just to stress how life is with electricity, we thought, okay, we'll just do it. First, they want to do it on paper. And I said, well, I'm not much of an environmentalist if I'm printing 30,000 papers in a very inefficient boat to take it to across Lake Victoria, then bring it back. So I said, okay, well, why don't we do it on the phones? Then I said, well, there's no electricity. So we had to get a MiFi, a little Wi-Fi system. We had to get just like one solar panel to operate our Wi-Fi, buy a bunch of cell phones, hire people to create an offline survey. It was very complicated. But in doing the research, we realized something, that the people weren't actually poor. You look at the area and there's no infrastructure. I mean, like, there's no roads, there's no fire station, there's one school and it'll literally make you cry. And but the people aren't poor. There's a fishing community, and during high season, these fishermen have a lot of money. I know someone who works for the Prime Minister in Uganda, and these fishermen make more than her. But the problem is there's no bank there. So during high season, if you go to the district, you can't get a room in the hotel. Very Western, like all of you, it's not a hotel to me. But you can't get a room, it's full of prostitutes because these guys have so much money. So then you realize, okay, you really start to think, what is the problem here? There's no cold chains. You wonder, you guys have money, but like, why aren't you exporting? There's fish. Like, there's something I'm not understanding. There's no cold chains, which is a huge issue. So then we thought, okay, well, why don't we put a mini grid here? Because we went back to the government, and for the government to extend the distribution line is very, very, very expensive. I don't have the number offhand, my professor does, but very expensive. And you have to imagine in our governments, the small budget is there to fight terrorism. It's supposed to provide water. It has so many places to go. It's wildly unpopular, even in the US, to ever put money towards infrastructure. So we made a deal with the government. We worked together, and we're like, okay, we're going to do a mini grid. But mini grids are very difficult to model financially, especially when you're dealing with a community that's never had electricity. Like your mom, your grandma, no one's ever had it. Paraffin works fine. We know how it works. We can still study. We're good. So then I thought, okay, we have to go. Linda told me this term last night at dinner. We have to go beyond the bulb, I thought. So then we started to think, okay, what other investments can we make to kind of supplement our our electricity investment and be able to pay the bills? And these are all things we were doing just off logic. I didn't know there's terms for all of these. It's productive use. So being that it's a fishing community, we figured, okay, well, why don't we make an ice plant? Very, very, very simple. So we've invested in an ice plant as well as a fish drying plant. And now these fishermen don't have to go on a literally 5-hour journey to mainland to buy ice, to take a 5-hour journey back with ice. Most of it's melted. Most of it's melted. They're overfishing. They can't even get close to the export level. The smoked fish right now, it's delicious, but if you see how it's made, you'd never eat it again. And then we thought, in living in the district to do all this research, we noticed that in the mornings, everybody would just walk in one direction. And you kind of wonder, like, what's going on? And they were all going to bathe and relieve themselves in the lake. Because I think there's maybe, like, I'm not exaggerating, I don't even know if there's 5 latrines in the district. So then you're kind of like, okay, there's clearly a need for toilets here. And then because of this water situation, everyone has to buy bottled water, which goes back into the lake. And it's kind of funny, because when we were talking to the government, they would say, you're investing money in Bavuma? Like, why? But to me, I'm like, this is amazing. Every single SDG you look at is part of our project. And I'm like, what a place for an innovator. Like, there's so much we can do here. Things don't have to be done the way they were done here in Brussels, or I grew up in Ottawa in Canada. So we thought, okay, water. People pay for water every day. We can use our electricity to purify the water. So, okay, that's our next investment. So I got to even look at my list of SDGs and see how many I've named. No poverty, which I prefer is creating prosperity. We got it. Health and well-being. We're going to alleviate the need for cooking fuel and charcoal. We got that. Quality education. We're going to have lights for our schools, but I believe in going beyond the bulb. Water, sanitation, invested in that. Affordable clean energy. Yep. Decent work, which is really what I care about creating jobs. So I spoke at the World Trade Organization last year, and it was really interesting. I'm not sure if you guys know about the new Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is very exciting. But the work that we do, I believe, is what is going to help Africa actually get there. It's the precursor to trade, and lots of room for innovation. Sorry, I know we're running out of time. I could talk forever.
Well, many, many thanks, Lucia, adding another exciting story. Now, before going to the questions from the audience, both these stories actually described the change in the societies, the change for the users, actually also some behavioral change. Because you introduced some new ways for the people. I'm really interested, how did you achieve this kind of behavioral change? Because this is not only something which you think about Africa. But for instance, if now we are aiming to be really the climate neutral area in the world, it also means that we need some behavioral changes of the people, of the users. Perhaps you can just point out a couple of things what actually helped you in order to make this change happen.
Yeah, I can go first. Well, for the way that we develop our project, we do a lot of community engagement. So during our first meeting, we're telling people we're going to bring electricity, and there were some people who literally wrote our company name on their homes. But then there were some who were like, oh, don't come here and take our women. And for a while, I'm like, what does that mean, And that I began to realize what that means is a lot of times when development workers come, they throw off the local economics. You have a lot more money than the people who you're there to serve. And it creates a lot of tension, and you could even find young girls who are like, yeah, I'm 18, and they're not. So we have a lot of planning for that. We also, the way we've modeled our project is in exchange for land, part of our land lease agreement is a profit sharing scheme. So we give a percentage of the sale of all of our water to the district just to show that we're here for the long haul, we're doing this together. I had another example, but I just lost it. So you go ahead, Linda.
Linda can
Yeah,
continue.
no, fantastic. The way we've approached the cooking problem is one of a utility scale, right? Right up until now, my experience has been the cooking is in the space of the small NGOs, the small players. It hasn't really been looked at utility scale, and that to me is a tragedy, because electricity we see the grid, and then the Minigrids come and say mop up the people that are sort of in the more remote areas where the Minigrid maybe doesn't make economic sense. But with cooking, you have a city like Nairobi, which is now a middle-income country. Kenya is a middle-income country, and yet we have this population that are in a hurry. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They're with it. They're going to work, they're earning money, they're bringing $500, $1,000, yet there is no affordable solution for them to cook, right? So we're cooking with medieval times, yet we have electricity, we live in the city, we drive cars. I mean, we are globally connected, except for the cooking area. So that to me is just a suggestion that this is a forgotten or a non-prioritized problem. And when I want to get really controversial, I say, if men cooked in sub-Saharan Africa, this would not be a problem, right? This is what I'm trying to be a little provocative. Anyway, but I need to answer your question directly. Behavior change. Looking at this problem from a utility standpoint, looking at it as a health issue, as an environment issue, etc., and then putting in place whatever mechanisms we put in for malaria, whatever mechanisms we put in for AIDS, whatever mechanisms we put in for all these global problems, is exactly the kind of mechanism we need to drive behavior change when it comes to the lack of clean cooking.
By the way, it has been said that dishwasher is one of the biggest inventions in the world, which actually has facilitated the life of women in particular, and enabled them to have the full-time jobs. One of those. Now it's time now also for the questions from the floor. Anyone would like to put a question, provide a comment? Mike is here. Here we don't have the one, I don't see the one which I can throw, but yes. Yes. Would you like to put a question? No? No one? Everything's clear? Well, while you are thinking, there is please, go ahead.
Can I ask to Ms. Bakulumpaji, whose story was really interesting, how did you actually manage to create this mini-grid? So what's the source of your electricity?
Good question. It's funny that I didn't even talk about that.
Sorry, because probably I didn't get it, but...
No, I didn't say it. Thank you. So to be fair, our mini-grids are still in development. Uganda, we've a lot of regulatory processes where at the last one, and we're going to start construction early next year. But the model, it is for solar. There's still some diesel, which people don't like, but solar diesel battery. Yeah, and they'll serve 8,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Another one? Yes, please.
Hi, just a general question. I'm curious to know, for both of you, your experience as women entrepreneurs in Africa, what challenges you face, things that maybe Europeans can learn, or what you can learn from a European perspective of being an entrepreneur in Africa. Thanks.
Do you want to go first? I'm trying to think of a polite answer for that. Politically correct answer. I think so. For me, it's kind of interesting. I'm Ugandan. Yes, I was born in Kenya. I was born during the war, so I grew up in Canada, moved there as refugees. So I don't really see a difference between the Western world and Africa too much. I think, though, being a woman, you kind of get the same treatment everywhere. Trying to really mince my words here. I don't, just from my own personal experience, I'm not an engineer. I used to work in fashion. You can look at my outfit, you could probably tell. My big challenge often can be being taken seriously. And it's something I kind of struggle with, because by nature, I'm very chatty, I'm very friendly, and sometimes I don't know if it gives the wrong impression to people. But that's my honest answer. That is the biggest challenge for me.
Perhaps I could just make a comment for your information. Namely, well, clearly energy, which we are discussing in this session, has been one of the priorities in our cooperation with Africa, in particularly in the area of research and innovation, has also water security, the climate-related issues. But now we've also started a pilot, namely the innovators, cooperation between the innovators, between the incubators, bringing together the innovative startup companies in Africa, well, actually in Kenya. Mm-hmm. We launched that last week, bringing together the incubators on both sides and also the startup companies, for them also to see the areas and ways of cooperation. So there is a way actually that actually the companies can collaborate, and as a result of that, already some 10 different memorandums of understanding were already agreed in order to cooperate between the incubators. So clearly there are the ways also for the cooperation between the companies. But I'd like also now to ask Professor von Braun, namely from your perspective, what do you see, namely now more the possibilities for cooperation, particularly in the research area?
Mm-hmm. Let me take it from that question. What can we learn from each other? And there's an interesting potential learning experience with local grids. We don't have them in Europe. And we find more and more how vulnerable centralized, sophisticated energy grid systems are. And we have a discussion in energy policy. How do we get out of that in order to use better the renewable energy sources in a decentralized way? And this is location specific differently. We have studied in India, China, Ethiopia, and Rwanda local grid systems with doctoral students and so on, long-term research projects. I'm totally behind the idea which you have put forward, but the implementation is difficult. You need a lot of community cooperation. And Africa is good at that, maybe better than we in Europe. But you also need institutional and technological innovations. The beautiful idea, which you are still pursuing, I mean, your local grid is not yet operational, we found is very difficult to implement, as long as there is also individual energy supply through the individual solar panel on the hut or on the house, and as long as there is the demand on the central grid. Because people want energy cheap and not pay for it and not be responsible for it. There's no difference in that between Europe and Africa. Now, the huge opportunity, Chair, is that solar is down to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So I think it is maybe with implementation 10 cents per kilowatt hour in local. But this is a huge progress thanks to big investments in Europe. Yeah, it was at €1 a decade ago. So the cooperation I see mainly in finance and in technological exchange and in science. I participated in the next Einstein Forum, the big science gathering of Africa. The next one is up next spring in Nairobi. And lots of the young entrepreneurs go for innovation in energy. So if you manage to bring them together with European entrepreneurs, it will fly by its own.
Okay, so that's a good hint where we could actually focus. Also between the cooperation between the innovators. But thanks for that point, which actually also reflects on the discussion that we had in another session, where we discussed one of the mission areas, the cities, smart climate neutral cities. And one of the issues which was brought forward there was also namely the local solutions for energy. And clearly, if you'd like to have also climate neutral cities and also those who can produce as much energy as they consume, which is a big challenge, but it's something which is actually achievable, then part of these solutions are also actually the local solutions, not the general grids, but actually then using a combination of different solutions, solar and others, in order to provide also these solutions that you've already developed for your local communities. But for that, we need more science, we need more innovators, we also need some behavioral change. All these are important components. Now let me see if we still have time. I guess we still have time.
5 minutes.
Yes, we do. For more questions, please. Anyone would like to ask? Yes, please.
So, Christoph Czernos from FEV in Aachen, Germany. So first of all, my compliments to your success in building up these companies and this business in Africa. I really admire you for that. I wonder how your fertilizer thing ended up. Wouldn't that also be maybe a source for creating energy on place?
Thank you for asking. You know, I still do want to do waste to energy one day. That's really what interests me. It's incredibly capital intensive. Minigrids are much cheaper, and I just found that I could make more impact in a faster way, because as much as, you know, my grids are not operational yet, they will be, and it does not take long to build a mini grid. So one day we can talk about it after too if you want.
Yeah, I can add to that. So we're doing waste to fertilizer as part of the circular economy. When you're looking at a cassava carbon slaughterhouse, when the cassava comes in, every single piece will have to be used. We're going to be analogous to the petroleum biorefinery, where every single part of the cassava is used. And out of that, we're going to have AD biogas, anaerobic digestion, and the permeate and the whatever will go into fertilizer back into the community. So we can partner on that.
Let's do it. We have our third partner right here.
Okay, no more questions. So now is there someone? No. Now I'd like, just in order to conclude the session, I'd like to come back to all the speakers. If you could highlight, because now we are also discussing now the main priorities for Horizon Europe in terms of international cooperation. Where would you put your focus in cooperating between Europe and Africa? Well, I guess, in the energy area, but you can also go beyond that. So, please.
Let me just highlight one point, and that is the need to get out of fuel wood and charcoal in Africa. And to focus on that and to come to clean energy with a threefold strategy: efficiency and cleanliness with the bio-based, the bringing in the solar and the wind. And Chair, let me conclude by saying it was a pleasure to be the quota man on this panel.
That was not the intention.
Let me emphasize, I'm the cook at home because my wife hates cooking.
I like it. I'm just going to add to what is said. Obviously, in this forum, I don't mind being a single issue person cooking, and I understand the European Research and Innovation Day. So for me, it's just, I guess, an open invitation around innovating around this issue that has been ignored for so long. I must finish with literally a 10-second story. I was the former director for the Partnership on Women's Entrepreneurship in Renewables, and this is a program coming out of the US State Department as a form of diplomacy. I'm not going to go into details around that. And one of the things, one of my board members, who is a 97-year-old woman, when I was very passionate, we've got to solve cooking and everything, she told me a very poignant story. And she was one of the founders of UNIFEM, which is now UN Women. And she did this, she was founding this in 1957, 1960s, as you can imagine. And she basically just said to me, Veve, I'm so excited that you're working on this in 2017. In 1960, cooking and the lack of clean cooking was one of the biggest priority areas that was identified as part of UN Women. 70 years later, professors shown the numbers. They're not going down, they're going up. So this is clearly an issue that we have not understood on a research and innovation standpoint. We don't understand how to approach this. And two, from a market-based standpoint, we don't understand how to monetize this issue. So from a research, for the researchers here, I would 100% like to invite this to be part of the things that you take a look at, especially if we're looking at SDG 7, because at the current rate, we're not going to achieve SDG 7 by 2030. We need $32 billion to flow into the area of cooking, and we now have $4 million a year. So this is clearly not an area of priority. So if you hear nothing else from Dr. Linda Davis today, it is let us see whether we can research and innovate around accelerating this forgotten part. Solar, wind, minigrids, gigabytes, very sexy things that everyone wants to talk about. Cooking, not so much. I would love us to change that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm quite sure everybody will remember it here. So.
For me, I just love to invite all of you to come to Uganda, come to Buvuma, just to come to the places where the solutions are really needed. And just for us all to talk and collaborate. I even think that, I'd love if there are people who in the room who don't necessarily work in energy, if there's people in forestry or in water or agriculture. I think for us to really innovate and create real solutions to real problems, we have to talk to people who are not like us. And you're all welcome in Uganda. Okay, excellent. Many, many thanks. Give a big applause to our excellent speakers. And I hope that all
all of you got some good ideas also for yourselves. So thank you very much for attending.